Hello, on this material I wanted to show you how to refine the highlights that we sketched in earlier materials. And for this I'm using a smaller brush, a 0.0 size. It can also be a size 0 brush, so something that you feel comfortable working on small details. So the first thing is we can clear some places that were maybe should have strong shadows, but we painted them making the sketch, so we can clear it out. So here is a place where the armor plates combine on his helmet, so we can mark it with the deepest color, the deepest shadow. Also we can mark the outline of the skull and all the small details on the helmet. So now we can just refine those shadows. And as you can see, I take not too much paint, just a little, just to have it only on the tip of the brush. Can outline the eyes if we've covered them with paint, so just to clear all the details. We'll focus now on the helmet and the chest piece. So refine the edges of the eagle, because I don't use washes. I always paint the shadows with a brush, so it's better to do it at first, just to refine the edges, and then you don't need to work on shadows anymore when making highlights. And here you can see also it's a recess. Could add a little more shadow in those places. Okay, so now starting to highlight a little, just go to the next tone, just a little brighter. So let's cover a little more surface. If you end up overpainting the sketch a little, just don't worry. Try to remember the placement of the light. All the colors that you place now, if you place them on a dark background, like here, will look very dark. But if you, even with a dark color, if you would paint on this place, on this surface, it would look brighter, because the color is more visible on brighter undercovers. So this gives us a way to achieve more vibrant colors on the miniature. Okay. And here you can of course paint with a bigger brush if you feel comfortable with it. Most of the time I paint with small brushes. I want to have a precise tip. that with that brush I have more control than with a bigger brush, because it doesn't hold that much paint, but it's now also easier to control the surface and make smooth blends. So let's add on higher, just to make it brighter. And step by step we'll add more light, more highlights, more brighter colors. But remember to do it on a smaller surface and just leave the previous colors that you applied. So if you want to make it very smooth, it takes some time. Sometimes it's you will need to go back a little just to cover the difference that you generated. Right now we don't see that much because we are operating with only very dark colors, but it's very important to have smooth transitions on dark places, because then the highlights are more visible. Also try working on bigger surfaces, so don't paint just the head. Try working on more armor plates around, because you will have the time for the paint to dry. So even if we paint with only a damp brush, you can see that it takes a little time just for the paint to dry. So we want this, because if you will paint in one place constantly, then adding water, thinner and just paint can give an effect where you can with brush strokes we can melt the paint and the undercover will be visible, so we don't want this. So adding more highlight. Just around the sketch, covering a little of it. So we can also start highlighting all the edges, just a little, because most of them will be can have highlights because of the light reflect from the surrounding, from the bottom, from the ground. So you can also start adding this. Here on his collar I also add some highlight, and I will highlight it even more, because you will see that this part will focus a lot of light, even on the eagle, which I will make non-metallic. It will reflect light, so it will give a little light here on this surface, because it will be reflect from this surface to this one. So we don't want to leave places that are completely dark. They will give a lot of contrast, but they will look just like unpainted. We want to add a little more detail to the shadows to make it more complex. Just small strokes with the side of the brush are sufficient, just to generate a smooth transition. Okay, now it's time to add more highlight. You can see that we don't see a big difference now. We even made the most of the surface a little darker, but we are building the highlight. So at first, when we are sketching, we had this color as a base for the armor, and then this one was the first color to generate the sketch, the first highlight. So we made a transition to using those colors, and then we want to add a little more highlight. So this one is the next one. So you can see that it takes some time. It's more time consuming to build the shadows because we operate on a bigger surface. Then when painting the highlights, it will be faster. You will see it, and it will be more visible. because we want a big contrast, so we started to paint with very dark paints. But now, adding more highlight, we will see the effect. Also the highlight from the bottom here. So continuing to highlight, also mind all the lines of highlight that you sketched earlier. Don't overpaint them right now, because you want to see the placement. So you can see we are working on the shapes that we planned earlier. Even if you cover the highlight at this stage, you can see that even if covering it with this color, you can see that the white, it's very visible from underneath. So it gives you more saturated, more bright colors in this place. And that's important. That's why we make this sketch, because it will be easier to achieve a big contrast on this surface. Also, as you can see, adding more highlights going to the midtones, the armor is getting a little brighter in general. Okay, so let's use the next one. I always add a little drop of thinner on the brush. If you leave the paint on the wet palette for a longer time, it will also start to dry out, so you can add little water or thinner if you want. I always add it to the palette, and also I use the thinner that I have on the palette just to mix it on the run, just to generate small glazes. So you can see that it's beginning to be visible. Also, when making edge highlights, just remember that don't use just only bright colors, because all the edges will also have shadows, will also have highlights. So as you can see, I make edge highlights on the run, because I want to place in some places I want to paint more light, in some places there won't be that much, so even the edge highlight will be darker. So even if you want to use this, if you want to show the edges just like Games Workshop does, try to add shadows and highlights to them. They will look more natural, they will fit the armor plate even more. So here you can see we generated a big difference, because I haven't worked on this place earlier. So we always can go back one shade and just glaze the place that is combining, where you can see the difference, and just hide it a little. So with thin glazes you can color it, darken it on the outskirts, so it will blend more. Okay. So here we also want to add more highlight. It's important to remember about direction of the light. So if you have this in mind, if you want, if you can imagine it and remember about it, so it will be a guideline for you. You won't get lost where to place the highlights. If you have problems with this, you can always use the lamp just to see how the light falls naturally. So for us will be from this side, yeah, because we have the light from above. And if you rotate the camera, maybe look from the side on the miniature, you will see where the shadows will be placed, because the lamps will tell you about it. So you can see that the big difference that we have had at the start, it's beginning to get smooth, even if we covered a little of the sketch. So you can see now, by adding more light, you can see the effect. But it's important, as I mentioned it earlier, it's important to work on the shadows, because they also give the final effect, even if you are only painting with very dark paint. From my experience, even painting skin tone, it's most of the time I paint shadows, colors that are only to the mid-tone, something like those colors. So it will take more time to operate on those colors and then less time just to make highlights because you are painting a smaller surface. Okay, so let's go even further, more highlight. So here you can see I have a bigger difference, yeah, because here's a lot of shadow, here's almost instantly there is a highlight. We can blend it a little, I will show you this in a moment, because we wanted the transition to be gradual, not that rough and big. So let's go down a few shades, maybe to this one, just to blend the difference, maybe a little thinner, because we don't want to the paint to cover that much. Okay, just a small glaze, and you can see that it's covering the difference. So adding more highlights. So you can see that the contrast gradually is getting bigger. Need to go back a little just to cover the difference that we generated here, because it shouldn't be that strong. You can see it takes a lot of time to make such a smooth transition, but it's worth it. It produces a very cool effect that looks non-metallic, like very reflective non-metallic metal surface. So okay, as you can see, it takes a little time. So let me finish and I will show you the result. Okay, so you can see that I finished the chest piece and the head. I finished blending and I blended it almost to white. So you can see all the places that we've planned earlier now are smooth. So it's the recreation of the sketch, even if I covered it earlier. But we had the places where the highlights should be. We knew it earlier, so now it was only brushwork to blend the transitions. So for me this is a very basic skill, because you want to know where to place the highlights, and that's why we do sketches, and then the next thing is to blend it. So if you focus on doing it at the start, to achieve smooth blends and understanding the object that you are painting, placing the highlights in right places, and then blending it, it will be a very big difference for your painting. Because even if you don't do any additional effects, don't do non-metallic metals, don't do different tricks, that's the basis of your painting. So if you master it, you can paint everything.